When it comes to determining what is the best Dragon Ball Z game, Sparking Meteor often comes up in the discussion. Coming out a year after the first entry, Sparking Meteor took advantage of the strong foundation laid out for it. This sequel offers a more comprehensive roster, refined combat mechanics, and an expansive story mode that delves deeper into the Dragon Ball Z universe. When asked in an interview about the game's title, series producer Ryō Mito explained that some people at the company worried adding a 2 to the sequel might deter those who hadn't played the first game. So they chose Neo instead, which pretty much just translates to Sparking New, but most of us have come to know it as
Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 2.
Released in late 2006, Sparking Meteor arrived just as the gaming world was shifting from the 6th to the 7th generation of consoles. As a result, it wasn't just a PS2 exclusive, but it also made its way to the Nintendo Wii. The Wii version of course incorporated some motion controls, like waving the nunchuck to have your character dash, and just simple stuff like that. Now I don't hate motion controls, in fact I actually really like gyro controls for aiming, but it's hard to argue that just like waggling a controller is more effective and reliable than just pressing a button. What is great about the Wii version is that it gives you the option of using the motion controls, or you can just use a classic controller or even a GameCube controller. Some extra characters are included in the Japanese and PAL releases of the Wii version that were not in the initial release, but beyond these differences, the PS2 and Wii releases are mostly identical. One of the most striking improvements in Sparking Meteor is the graphical overhaul. The previous game's blockiness, which detracted quite a bit from the visual appeal, has been significantly improved. For the most part anyway. Nappa's face still looks a bit like he got hit with Brock's drying pan. Overall though, the character models look much better, not only in how they are modelled and textured, but also in how they are posed and move. The vibrant cell shading really brings out the richness of the characters, making them pop against the backgrounds of the arenas. Each character closely reflects their anime counterparts, with a level of detail that makes them instantly recognisable. While recognising characters wasn't an issue in the first game, the extra level of polish in Sparking Meteor goes a long way in adding to the game's appeal. The cell shading aesthetic is particularly notable. This visual style, characterised by bold outlines and bright colours, mimics the look of the anime pretty closely. In Sparking Meteor, this technique is used to great effect, giving the game a sort of timeless quality. Even today, Sparking Meteor still looks really good. The cell shading aesthetic ages exceptionally well, maintaining its appeal long after more photorealistic graphics have started to show their age. But Sparking Meteor hasn't only improved in the looks department, it has also made some significant improvements in the gameplay. Some would even say that it is the best in the series. Combat in Sparking Meteor is fluid and impactful, thanks to the refined fighting system paired with the improved animations. Each fighter moves with a grace and agility that reflects their unique fighting style. The animations are smooth and each attack feels weighty and powerful. The developers have ensured that every punch, kick and special move carries the appropriate impact, making the battles feel intense and satisfying. During battles, fighters take noticeable damage that is visually represented on their models. The foundational basics of the combat are pretty similar to the first game, but there are enough differences that make Sparking Meteor stand out as its own thing. Right from starting up your first match, you will immediately be met with a couple of changes. The most obvious one is the complete overhaul of the HUD, which is much better at conveying key information to the player. One improvement that people don't really mention much is how the health bar works. In Sparking, every character only had one health bar to represent their HP, no matter how much health they actually had. This made it hard to gauge from a glance how powerful your opponent actually was, and sometimes it just looked like you were doing almost no damage, even when landing a super or ultimate attack. Luckily, Sparking Meteor fixes this issue with characters now sporting multiple health bars, making it way easier to tell how much health a character actually has. Plus, it is way more satisfying to land a powerful attack and to see their bar just drain away. It is also way more clearer how much ki you have and just how much you need to build up for certain attacks. The other change that you may notice at the beginning of a match is that you are able to actually move around, so you have a chance to set up for an attack before the match even begins. And when the match does begin, this is where the differences start to hit you in the face. On the surface, the combo system looks almost the same as in Sparking, but if you are paying attention, you will notice that the hit chains don't automatically end after a simple 5-hit combo. There are also more follow-ups for heavy hits like charge attacks, and that is another aspect that has seen a bit of a change. In Sparking, the charge meter would build up by landing hits, but in Sparking Meteor, you're able to fully charge it by just simply using a charged attack. Does that make sense? I don't know. It was hard to word it, but you get what I mean. Sparking Meteor relies a lot more on stepping when extending a combo. When an opponent is knocked back, your character can step forward and continue the combo. This small change really helps with the flow of the fights, and it isn't too difficult to perform even for a shitty player like me. As in the first game, I felt like I just couldn't get that much of a handle on following up on my attacks, but Sparking Meteor made this so seamless. It also just helps that a lot of the controls have a better layout and are more responsive. Something that is really hard to show in a video, unfortunately. And Sparking, when chaining together actions in a combo, you would press specific face buttons in order to perform certain attacks within the combo. While in Neo there are different attacks that you can include in your combos, they are all executed using the same button, but now the attack performed depends on where you are within the combo. Now I'm not skilled enough at these types of games to know whether this is better or worse. It's just different. I had no issue with the way it worked in the first game, and I have no issue with the way it works in this game. But in Neo you do have more options when chaining combos together, as when you step forward, depending on the character, will affect the follow-up attack they will perform. Vanishing attacks were added, which are really useful after hitting an opponent away. Max power mode is still in the game and is a bit more useful this time around, although some aspects of it can be annoying, like the infinite combo that you can do that lasts as long as max power lasts, and if you get caught in it from behind, there is no way to escape. It's great if you're the one doing it. Finishing and super finishing moves are still around, but they are now called Blast 2s and Ultimate Blasts. They work pretty much the same way, but there are a lot more of them this time around. The key attack animations are beautifully rendered, capturing the sheer power and intensity of these moves. Each key blast, energy wave, and super attack is accompanied by stunning visual effects that make you feel the impact. Whether it's Goku's Kamehameha or Vegeta's Final Flash, the game brings these awesome attacks to life with a level of detail and flair that is both faithful to the anime and satisfying to use. One of the major additions to the combat system is the ability to transform, fuse, and use absorptions during fights. This opens up a lot of options for how you can approach each battle. Transformations not only change a character's moveset, but also let you chain together super attacks, or Blast 2s, whatever they're called. Just so you know, if I say super attack, I mean Blast 2s. In both Sparking and Sparking Meteor, there's a cooldown period before you can use your super again, even if you have enough ki. However, if you transform, the animation time counts towards this cooldown. By the time the transformation finishes, you're ready to fire off another super attack at your opponent. Transformations make the combat more dynamic, letting you maximize your damage output in creative ways. However, there is still the issue with some key attacks causing the screen to fade to white, which I don't like. I don't think they ever fix this. The gameplay doesn't pause during this, and the AI still has an advantage since you can't see. However, I will admit that this isn't as bad as in the first game, simply because the lock-on system is much better. The lock-on is more reliable because they added in an improved camera. If you watched my retrospective of the first Sparking game, you will know that I thought the camera was the worst aspect of that game, and I still do. Well, thankfully, I think the devs agreed, as they clearly put in a lot of work in improving how the camera works. One of the ways they improve the camera is by alleviating the issue caused by characters getting too close to the camera. In the first game, they would just completely block your view, and you pretty much had to fight blind until the camera decided you're allowed to see again. In Sparking Meteor, characters will now go into a transparent silhouette mode, so you can still see where your character is without them obscuring the view of the opponent. The stages are also just better designed for the camera, as there is less stuff for it to get caught on. This compromise does leave some stages looking a bit empty, but during gameplay you hardly even notice, and I think the trade-off was well worth it. Team battles are a new feature in this game, and you'll find many of them in the story mode, as well as being available in the other game modes. Before each fight, you can choose the order of your team's lineup. The character you put in the first slot is the one you control at the start of the match. During the fight, you can switch between team members once the purple bar fills up. If you have the right characters on your team, you can also perform fusions. For this to work, the characters need to be on the same team, and the fusion character must already be unlocked. That would have been a cool alternative way to unlock fusions though. They didn't do it though. One of the more disappointing issues with the first game was the awful tutorial.
In the menu switch by pressing R3 button. Why?
It did a terrible job of teaching new players the mechanics of the game. It was non-interactive and a complete slog to get through. Fortunately, the tutorial in this game is a lot better. but it still does have its issues. The tutorial is set up as a training session with Vegeta, concluding with him achieving Super Saiyan status. It is quite cool that they incorporated a small story into the tutorial, which makes it a lot more enjoyable. Vegeta's stern, no-nonsense demeanour adds a bit of character to what could otherwise be a dry and tedious process.
Why don't you just go join Goku and the others?
You gotta be kidding! What good would it do me to train with weaklings and fools?
Oh, Vegeta, you need to lighten up.
This time around you do actually get to play the tutorial, which alone makes it far superior to the first game. You read through the information cards explaining the controls, and then you are loaded into a stage where you can practice said controls. Unfortunately, it doesn't give you much guidance after this. I think a good tutorial should be seamless and intuitive, guiding the player through each step and ensuring they understand the mechanics before moving on. It should provide feedback, correcting mistakes, and reinforcing correct actions. This not only helps new players get up to speed, but also makes the learning process more engaging and less frustrating. Sparking Meteor's tutorial misses the mark on this one. It is a bit disjointed and offers no feedback to the player. If you're having problems with something, the game will not help you. This lack of feedback can be frustrating, especially for new players who might not be familiar with the game's mechanics. A slightly more guided and step-by-step approach would have been much more effective, I think. Not all of the tutorials are playable though. There are some techniques and mechanics that you just read through. Sometimes complex concepts or advanced techniques are better suited for a text explanation. However, for basic controls and essential gameplay mechanics, an interactive tutorial is always preferred. Despite its flaws, this tutorial is a marked improvement over its predecessor. It's more interactive and engaging, and the inclusion of Vegeta's training session adds a bit of flair. But even with a decent tutorial, Sparking Meteor still has a bit of a difficulty curve issue. In fact, the discrepancy between the different difficulty settings actually can make the learning curve steeper than it needs to be. On the lowest difficulty setting 1, it's way too easy. A new player on this setting will never learn to dodge or counter properly, because half the time the AI will just do nothing. It's trivial to knock these dummies down and then they take forever to get back up.
I'm dying. Help me.
Naturally, you'll pick a more difficult setting. When you switch to the medium difficulty, the AI becomes inconsistent, swinging wildly from competence to utter stupidity. One moment it's attacking and dodging with good timing, the next it's just sitting there. It's almost like a switch goes off in their head. A new player wouldn't get the challenge level necessary to drive skill progression and get familiar with the controls. This can end with new players getting absolutely wrecked in one fight and doing the wrecking in the next. The game can't decide whether to hold your hand or slap you in the face. But if you start on hard, the AI is going to go into overdrive, spamming special attacks and really giving you a moment to breathe. This is clearly meant for players who already know their way around the controls. A new player would just get wailed on. But for players that have gotten good at the game, this difficulty setting is challenging and rewarding. What the game is missing is a middle ground, where it provides challenging fights and rewarding progress, and balances it against the difficulty of mastering the controls. A balanced AI setting such as this would prevent new players from getting overwhelmed and make for a much smoother learning experience. Despite this issue, I still think Sparking Meteor is one of the best games to start with when trying to get into the series. Its comprehensive story mode and wide array of characters make it a great introduction to the Dragon Ball Z universe. The game's mechanics are deep and rewarding, but the inconsistent difficulty can make it tough to learn at first. Once you get past that initial learning curve, you'll find a game that's both challenging and incredibly fun to play. And by far the most fun and my personal favourite part of the game is the story mode. The story mode in Sparking Meteor, dubbed Dragon Adventure, truly lives up to its name. Among all of the games in the series, this one feels the most like an actual adventure. This is largely due to the way the story mode is structured. Instead of simply navigating through a menu, you get to fly around an actual world map. It's clear that Dragon Adventure drew a lot of inspiration from Budokai 3's Dragon universe, but is it better? Maybe. Let's dive into how Dragon Adventure actually plays. Despite the similarities, it's far from a copy-paste job. As is typical in Dragon Ball Z games, the story is divided into sagas. When I say it like that, it makes it sound like I think this is a bad thing, but I don't. There is a reason long stories are often split into arcs or sagas. It works. In Neo there are separate sagas, but unlike Budokai 3 story mode where you select a character at the start and follow them through to the end, only seeing the story from that character's perspective, Neo has you playing as multiple characters. While I love Budokai 3 story mode, I think Neo's approach is better for story coherence. It feels way less disjointed. One of the standout features of Dragon Adventure is the freedom to explore the world map. The semi-open world aspect makes the game feel more engaging. Flying around, discovering different locations, and encountering various characters along the way adds a lot to the experience. It also offers a nice little cooldown after intense battles. It's not just about fighting, it's about the adventure, but also mostly about the fighting. Moreover, the sagas are more detailed and fleshed out. The fact that you get to fight as other characters within the saga allows for a more involved narrative, as you get to see the story unfold from different perspectives. Sparking Meteor has a boatload of story content. Aside from going all the way through the Dragon Ball Z story arc, there's also all of the Dragon Ball Z films that have been released by that point. Apart from World's Strongest, that one was skipped for some reason. And also Dead Zone, that one isn't here either. So I guess my statement about all the films being represented was a lie. Although they did include the anime-only Garlic Jr. arc that everyone hated as a kid because you just wanted to see what happened with Goku. But you had to watch through this filler that goes nowhere. But what else were you going to watch? There are only 3 channels. In New Zealand, there was 3 channels. I don't know, unless you're rich and could pay for more TV. Not in my house. Dragon Ball GT is also covered in Sparking Meteor, though sadly there's no dedicated saga to the original Dragon Ball series. It's a bit of a shame, but I guess it would make sense since the characters couldn't fly at that point in the story, although they could have had Goku on the flying Nimbus though.
Stop whining.
But honestly, with the amount of content that's here, there's more than enough to keep you busy for hours. And I haven't even mentioned my personal favourites, the what if scenarios. One of the highlights of the first game was definitely the what if scenarios, complete with dedicated sagas to showcase them. Sparking Meteor brings back this feature, but they're even more compelling this time around, due to the improved story presentation. It feels like you're playing out these scenarios in their entirety, rather than just selecting fights from a menu. Unfortunately, there aren't as many what-if scenarios, but they are significantly longer and more detailed than those in the first game. These scenarios don't unlock automatically. You need to defeat certain opponents with certain characters in the story mode to access them. I'm not going to say which ones. Before beginning each saga, you'll be met with some narration that sets up what is going on, and the narration sections just look plain bad. The garish gold border just does not mesh well with the character art. The character art looks fine on its own, but the overall look to these screens look like assets taken from different projects. I honestly do not know what they were thinking when they came up with this. The voice narration is really good though. It sounds like it could have been ripped straight from the anime.
Touched by the Dragon Balls.
In fact, all of the voice acting is pretty decent, but it is held back a bit by the uninspired writing and direction. The rapid pace at which the story progresses does not give the voice actors enough room to fully explore the character's emotional range. As a big fan of the Funimation voice cast, this is particularly jarring, as the anime excels at its dramatic pauses, intense emotions, and powerful voice performances that elevate the storytelling. I know that the grunting and yelling has become a bit of a meme at this point, but I think they work well within the contents of the show. The sound design of this game does a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to creating a captivating atmosphere. For the first time in a while, the English release got a new set of songs, rather than just reusing the Budokai soundtrack. Some of my favourites are Capture the Dragon, Open Wings, and of course Arcadia. Some of these tracks are surprisingly subdued for a fighting game, but they work. It reminds me a lot of the approach that the Legacy of Goku series took with its music, which is severely underrated in my opinion. After the short intro to the saga, you'll be dropped into the overworld map. Flying is very straightforward. You can either fly around slow or not slow. They also allow you to control your elevation slightly for some reason, but you don't really use it. I know I keep bringing up Budokai 3 story mode, but I don't think Neo's flying feels as good. and Budokai 3 you're like, but here you're just like, they probably had to turn down the speed a bit since the overall map isn't as large. But even though it is smaller, there is actually more to do. The red squares on the map mark the main story objectives. These are the critical points you need to visit to progress through the story. It's pretty straightforward. Head to the red squares, fight the battles, and move the narrative forward. However, the game also includes yellow squares, which mark optional areas. At first, these optional areas seem promising. They usually feature a character you can talk to, offering basic tutorial information or some background context. While this can be mildly interesting at the beginning, it quickly becomes repetitive and boring, unfortunately. After the first few hours, the novelty wears off and these conversations feel more like a chore than any engaging part of the game. As you progress deeper into the game, the utility of the optional areas diminish even further. Initially, you might be checking these optional areas in hope of finding useful items or the elusive Dragon Balls. On occasion, the yellow squares do hide optional fights, which can be quite challenging. These battles are often against high level opponents and present some of the tougher fights in the story mode.
Oh no!
That's my knee! Damn it! Man!
The downside, you only get one shot at these fights. If you lose, you get kicked back to the overworld map, and the marker for that fight disappears. It's kind of heartbreaking when this happens because you're just like, no, my experience points. I really wish the game gave you more than one attempt at these fights. I'm not that good, okay? I need practice. While these optional areas do help to create a sense of a larger, more expansive world, they often feel like pointless bloat. The intention behind them is good. They're supposed to enhance the game's immersion and give players more to do, but in practice they often fall short. The lack of clear markers to indicate what each spot contains means you end up spending a lot of time visiting locations, waiting through loading screens, only to discover there's nothing of interest there. It's not even busy work. It's nothing work, because more than often than not, there's simply nothing there. The repetition and lack of meaningful content in these optional areas can detract from the overall experience. Perhaps if there were more specific markers indicating the type of content you could find, be it an item or a challenging fight, it would make exploring these areas more rewarding and less tedious. Instead, the current system leaves you guessing and often disappointed. Another area where Sparking Meteor falters is in the presentation of its story cutscenes. They are slightly better than the first game, but not by much. Most of the improvement stems from the fact that the game's character models look better overall. Despite this, the cutscene animations remain stiff and lackluster, with most scenes simply featuring two characters talking at each other. It's kind of weird because the animation in the actual gameplay is quite good, but then you switch to the cutscenes and they're just like, they've added character portraits with speech bubbles, but these portraits are lifeless and do little to convey the emotions of the characters. It kind of reminds me of how conversations are handled in Persona games, where there's nice artwork of the character that is animated to show their emotions. Wait, was Persona 3 even out at this point?
Huh?
Not really. It came out the same year, so it's not a direct comparison. But that method works because it effectively conveys emotion and the camera is usually zoomed out so the portrait is the focus. As Sparking Meteor, the portrait is static for the most part and the camera is zoomed in on whoever is talking, with the character model being the one that is animated. It feels like someone saw another game using this layout and wanted to implement it, but they didn't have time to do it properly. They were on the right track though. If this had been done better, it would have improved the story presentation while keeping the game's scope manageable. The story mode is massive, with way too many cutscenes for animators to create custom animations for everything. The story in Sparking Meteor is comprehensive enough to allow players to follow along even if they are not entirely familiar with the source material. This is a notable achievement considering the vast lore of the Dragon Ball universe. However, while the game does a good job of showcasing the breadth of the Dragon Ball story, it falls short in capturing the depth and allure that the original manga and anime bring to the table. The main issue lies in the writing and dialogue, which often feels stilted and lacks the charm that fans have come to love. In the manga and anime, characters are given room to grow and develop, with their personalities shining through in their interactions. In contrast, the game's storytelling can sometimes feel like a rapid-fire recreation of key plot points, missing the emotional beats that make these moments memorable. Now, this issue isn't exclusive to Sparking Meteor. In fact, almost all of the Dragon Ball Z games have this issue. Honestly, Sparking Meteor is actually pretty up there when it comes to like getting it. One of the challenges in adapting a beloved series like Dragon Ball into a video game format is the need to balance between staying true to the source material and creating an engaging gameplay experience. Sparking Meteor leans heavily towards the latter, which is not a bad thing, but it often comes at the expense of the former. The result is a storyline that, while accurate and inclusive of major events, feels somewhat emotionless at points. For example, iconic moments such as Goku's first transformation into a Super Saiyan, the sacrifice of Vegeta against Majin Buu, and Gohan's climactic battle with Cell are all present in the game. These scenes include the same basic dialogue, but they miss the subtle character development and emotional weight that Akira Toriyama was able to include to the original works. The characters' internal struggles, their growth, and their intrinsic dynamics between them are often glossed over, making the game's story feel like a highlight reel rather than a fully fleshed out narrative. Again, Sparking Meteor is not the only one guilty of this. The game's structure also contributes a bit to this feeling. Dragon Adventure Mode, while more immersive thanks to its world map and more interactions with characters, still falls into the trap with players moving from one battle to the next, with story segments often serving merely as bridges between fights rather than meaningful storytelling moments. Despite some of its shortcomings, Dragon Adventure genuinely lives up to its name, offering a structured yet entertaining experience that allows players to feel like they're embarking on an actual adventure. It far surpasses the first game's story mode and is the main reason why I think so many people think so highly of this game. Story modes are always my favourite aspects of DBZ games, and this game is no exception. But another standout feature of the second entry in the series is the character roster. Sparking Meteor boasts over 129 playable characters, including transformations and fusions. When you subtract those, there are probably about 80 to 90 unique characters to choose from. A common criticism of these games is many characters feel copy-pasted, with similar movesets and mechanics. While I understand where this complaint comes from, it's a bit like saying all chess pieces feel the same if you move them one square at a time like pawns. If you play the same way with every character, they're going to feel the same. And before you say anything, I am aware that not all chess pieces can move like pawns. I'm talking to you, Joe. In Sparking Meteor, every character shares the same basic rush combo. If you just spam that combo with both Broly and Boruto, you'll miss the nuances that make each character unique. Broly is a powerhouse, slow but incredibly strong, while Boruto is lightning fast, to the point of feeling almost unfair. The game includes many minor characters that you don't often see in other titles. It's impressive that the developers took the time to include them. Whether you're a fan of the main characters like Goku and Vegeta, or enjoy the more obscure fighters, there's something here for everyone. The transformations and fusions add another layer of complexity to the game. Each character's transformation can change their playstyle and abilities. Fusions like Vegeta and Gogeta combine the strength of two characters, creating some of the most powerful fighters in the game. This variety keeps the gameplay interesting as you can experiment with different characters and their transformations. The game also gives you the ability to customize a character through the reintroduction of Evolution Z. When you win a fight or a tournament, you'll be rewarded with some Zenny and occasionally Z items. Zenny can be used at Barba's shop, which can be accessed from the Otherworld map and the menu. Barba is always found at her palace, where she'll sell you Z items and also buy from you. Z items are crucial in this game, as they are key to leveling up your characters in the story mode. Well, technically you're leveling up the Z items themselves. Before a fight, you are given the option to enter Evolution Z, where you can equip these Z items. When you equip Z items to a character and win a fight, those items gain experience and become more powerful, which in turn boosts the characters equipped with them. It's an interesting twist to a traditional leveling system. One of the best parts about this system is that since you're leveling the Z items, not the characters, you can transfer those levels to another character, reducing the grind. I really like this system, and I wish more games would adopt it. Z Evolution hasn't changed that much, aside from the leveling aspect. Characters still have their own base stats that can be further enhanced. There are also specialized Z items, and there are a lot more of them this time around. Z Fusion is back too, and just like in the first game, you'll need to use it to unlock certain characters and obtain some of the best Z items. One of the best things about Sparking Meteor is how it caters to both casual players like me and the more hardcore players. Casual players can jump in and have fun with the basic combos and flashy moves, while more dedicated players can dive deep into the mechanics, learning the strengths and weaknesses of each character. This accessibility is a significant part of the game's appeal. Dragon Ball Z Sparking Meteor is a prime example of how a sequel can significantly improve upon its predecessor. This game builds on the foundation laid out by the first installment, enhancing nearly every aspect to provide a superior gameplay experience for both casual and hardcore players. You could make a convincing argument that this game is not only the best in the Sparking series, but the best Dragon Ball Z game, period. Sparking exemplifies a game with a low skill floor but a high skill ceiling. The more you play and the closer you get to mastering it, the more you appreciate its hidden gameplay complexities. Complexities that were absent in its predecessor, and even some that are absent in its sequel. If you've never played a Tenkaichi game before and want to get into the series, start with this one. You'll come for the story mode, but stay for the cancels, which I still cannot do. I watched so many tutorials and I still can't do it.